Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first AATF Technology Tuesday and Thursday webinar for 2021. We would like to welcome everyone to the series, which will lead up to the main event happening in 2023. The first webinar in the Africa Automation Technology Fair Technology Tuesday and Thursday series will kick off with an exciting big picture panel discussion. Our first panelist is Johan Martens. Born and raised in Pietermaritzburg, Martens completed a BSc electrical engineering, at Potchefstroom University, where he started the Engineering Society and Radio PUK. He subsequently joined the SAIMC as a member while working at Sasol as an instrumentation manager. Next came a move to Mossel Bay as a part of the project team to build Mosgas, where after he joined Siemens Business Services as a senior project manager. Martens became actively involved in the SAIMC when he learned the new continued professional development, CPD, requirements about to be introduced by EXA. The president, Johan van Jaarsveld, appointed him to council to manage this on behalf of the SAIMC and its members. Johan is currently the CEO of the SAIMC. Welcome, Johan. It's great to have you today.
Thank
Our
you,
next panelist is Mark van Pelt. Mark has been with Pepper & Fuchs since 1989 as the co-founder of Pepper & Fuchs Belgium. In 1997, he transferred to Pepper & Fuchs global headquarters in Mannheim, Germany, to be the Director of Global Account Management. In 2005, he became the Sales Director in Process Automation, responsible for the sales and marketing activities for Western Europe and Africa. After identifying the incredible growth opportunities within Africa, Mark relocated to South Africa in 2014 to become the Managing Director and Sales Director for Pepper & Fuchs Africa. Mark heads up two working groups on Industry 4.0 for the Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Mechatronics and Control, the SAIMC, and the German Chamber of Commerce and Industry, AHK, in Southern Africa. Mark has also been active in the Field Com Group for almost 14 years and currently is the Regional Manager for Africa since 2016. Mark is currently on the board of the SAIMC, as well as being one of the members of the SAIMC's Supply Advisory Council. He served as the chairperson of the Industrial Instrumentation Group in 2018. And for several years, he was the vice chairperson of the EU Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Southern Africa. So thank you both, Mark and Johan, for joining us.
Thank you, Chardonnay.
It's great having you here. We're very eager to get some insights into the big picture and what the industry has in store for us moving forward. So I have a couple of questions for you, as this is a bit of a discussion. The last year has been provided as an interesting environment for most. How do you think that COVID has helped and hindered the technology environment?
Hi, Chardonnay. I'll kick off with a short-term version. Manufacturing was interesting. We saw that South Africa was able to manufacture PPE, CPAP, and ventilators on a very short notice, which was quite interesting. Our imports, however, was hindered because it took much longer to get here because of all the delays, and that caused associated huge storage costs and lack of resources due to people having to isolate.
Great, thanks, Johan. That's very interesting. It's fantastic that we have really pulled together and taken something so devastating and turned it into an opportunity. Mark, what do you see as COVID helping and hindering the environment from a long-term perspective?
I think at the end of the day, what we need to be looking at is to the global picture. South Africa, at the end of the day, is also part of that. So if we take our helicopter and we fly a little bit over the globe, then what we have seen happening is that the power for the regions, or the power of the regions, has been intensifying. What I mean with that is about 10, 15 years ago, everybody was talking about globalization and the world is my backyard, and we all can work together as one big global society. Today, that is further away than it ever was. At the end of the day, we are talking about the global regions decoupling, or patchwork globalization is one of those other statements that you see. You see the Asians, primarily the Chinese, doing their own thing. You see the Americans, and luckily now with President Biden, they are taking a little bit of a bend in their attitude, but they are still doing their own thing. And me being a European, us the Europeans are also taking a direction which is not necessarily in line with what the other world regions are doing for the moment. And I think that whole situation has been amplified by COVID. At the beginning, we started saying, yeah, this is the Chinese, and why is this happening, and blah, 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 blah. At the end today, we have learned in business society globally that we are too depending on certain players in certain world regions. And that's, if you talk about hindering, we have learned the hard way that our supply chains have been gravely disrupted. And that includes also South Africa. But if you look today to the material availability, or better said, the non-availability of materials around the world, then you can easily conclude that something is not right. We are organized for a global world, but the world is no longer globalized. We actually see that certain players, let's take in our sector the electronics, the chip manufacturers, they are focused or centralized in Vietnam or in Malaysia or in China. But there is almost no chip manufacturer left in Europe, nor is there almost no chip manufacturer left in the United States. Now, if the world is going to be a patchwork of globalization, everybody doing their own thing, you quickly come to the conclusion that the intercontinental supply chains are strongly disturbed. And we, as an African continent, we hang a little bit in between those three big forces around the world. And we need to start thinking, we need to rethink the models also for South Africa. And I think connected to that, localization, manufacturing things more locally. And Johan was referring to the CPAP devices during the COVID crisis. That is one of those examples where we were able, with our know-how, with our infrastructure in South Africa, to do things locally. But there is much more that needs to be done to uplift our capabilities to a global level, but we'll come to that later on, I think.
Great, thanks so much, Mark. Yes, I think looking at it from a global perspective, how we used to operate versus how we have to operate now is completely different. We have to remain flexible, and actually the opportunities are endless. So thanks very much for that. Just to advise the audience, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the public chat, and we'll direct them to either Mark or Johan to respond to during the presentation. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Prior to 2020, we had just entered the Industry 4.0 era. Do you think that COVID, post-COVID environment has pushed us into Industry 5.0?
Chardonnay, if I may jump into this matter, because as you mentioned before, I'm active in a couple of working groups that are organizing things around the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0 in particular. I think we need to abstract from going from Industry 4 to Industry 5. I think what we have seen happening, and believe it or not, COVID has speed up that whole process, is that digitalization is happening more than ever before. And I think a very good example is where we were used to go to the shops, we are all buying online now. I was reading an article in Business Tech this morning where they were saying, is it macro or is it Take a Lot that is the biggest one now? Well, I think we all know the answer to that question. Take a Lot obviously is generating more online business than macro has been doing, because they are specialized in, let's call it, a physical sales. The customer goes to the shop and touches and feels the thing, versus today we are doing more and more of our purchasing online. Now, and that's a very simplistic but available in everybody's day life approach of digitalization and how that evolves further on. If we look to industry, and then I think I might want to focus in South Africa in particular on the mining industry, we as a supplier in that sector, we see a very clear intensity increase of digitalization. A lot of processes, including now also your COVID-related processes on asking all those questions, measuring the person's temperature, and so on, are all reasons to go more digital. Hence the reason that, for instance, mobile phones and tablets are replacing paperwork processes today. And the mining industry as such is per definition, or was per definition already in conversion from doing things the classical way to doing things digitalized. Because of COVID, that process has also increased. The demand for raw materials, and South Africa, if I'm well informed, has about 127 minerals that we are mining. That demand has increased quite drastically, and also the competition between the mines and the world areas. And I come back to my statement earlier on, we as Africans, and South Africans in particular, we need to make sure that we get the full benefits of the mines, and there is only one way to make South African mines better and more competitive, and that is using digitalization. Whether we call this Industry 4 or Industry 5, many countries around the world are going away from the 4.0 or the 5.0. It's all about what is it going to bring to us human beings? What is it going to bring to us as a sustainable environment, doing that with sustainable economy? What are the advantages in there, and what technologies are available? And if you look to that whole evolution, yes, from Industry 3.0 to 4.0 was a big step, but I think this is the first smaller step in bigger steps that still need to come afterwards. Whether we call it 4.0 or 5.0, I wouldn't focus too much on the numbers, but more to the content and what it means for a continent and a country like South Africa.
Great, thanks very much, Mark. I think you have really given us clarity from that perspective. We did get a question from the audience whilst you were explaining to us. It's from Yuri. So the question is, playing devil's advocate, if you look at the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs reports, it's clear that automation will happen and jobs will be disrupted. What are your thoughts on the moral obligations of companies that implement automation?
That question was going to come later on anyhow, so let's tackle it now. I think the first starting point that I would like to give here is yes, automation and Industry 4 in the fourth industrial revolution is disrupting work. We need to define in many areas the new way of working. Now, I do believe that the fact that we are here sitting all online, in a normal situation, we would have rented a hotel room and we were all sitting together in that room and we had a nice coffee in between, etc., and do some networking during lunch. That indicates that the way we are working today already has been disrupted, not necessarily by the fourth industrial revolution, but because of all the happenings around COVID-19. Now, luckily, we already had a certain level of digitalization, allowing us to do what we are doing now. Now, is automation going to be taking away jobs? That is, people are saying, oh, robots, they will take away jobs. Actually, that is an absolutely wrong statement. And let me explain why I feel that that is a wrong statement. At the end of the day, you are looking to a global market. And I have said earlier on that that global market is even decentralized, stronger than it was even before. That means that between those bigger world areas, and let's take Africa also part of that equation, we need to be more competitive. That means we need to do the job better, and we need to do the job more cost effective. Better means a quality that is competitive on a global basis. If a BMW in Roslin produces an X3 in South Africa, or a person buys that X3 from Spartanburg in the US, or from Nanjing in China, the customer expects wherever that car is coming from the same quality. That's where automation kicks in. Now, talking to several people in the car industry, and let's take that industry as an example because it's an important one for South Africa. Many of those people say we are automating there where it affects the quality of our end product, but we are not necessarily automating to have less workers in the plant. That's absolutely not true. And that's where I always say you need to automate in the African way and according to the African needs. Jobs that can be done cost effectively with people need to continue to be done by people. Jobs or actions that need to be automated because it influences the quality of the end product, we need to continue doing those jobs. That means that we as employers, and I'm answering now the question about the moral obligation that we have, we as the private sector as well as government, we have a very big task in making sure that we in three areas, that we skill, upskill, and reskill people, that we offer them the opportunity to even change from one sector to the other sector. You see also globally, and we'll touch upon that later on, that a decarbonization is going on. You can imagine that within now and the next 30 to 50 years, coal mines will be out of business, or at least the demand for coal will be reduced to an absolute minimum. That means that we need to reskill people working in the coal mines to be able to work in other sectors. And we can talk about that many more time, but I think this is kind of the essence of what I wanted to give as an answer to this question. Johan, perhaps you have another opinion?
No, actually, I don't. I agree with you completely. Just for interesting sake, where people talk about Industry 4, they normally talk about connected devices, data analytics, and AI, where Industry 5 is collaborative robots and mass customization. And like Mark correctly said, this is all flowing together in one stream that's just developing more and more to ensure the quality of the product and not to get rid of people.
Great, thanks very much, Mark and Johan. As Mark mentioned, that was one of my questions for later, so I'm glad we've covered that. There was another comment that had come through as well whilst you were talking about the Industry 4.0 and 5.0, from Michael that said, I've been working with South Africa some years back, whereby there were mostly everything you can imagine to purchase there. And as residing in Mauritius, it was only 4 hours flight to go and find the item to buy and import. Now that COVID-19 is present, the political, not some weeks back, will South Africa continue to supply Mauritius from a political perspective? I'm not sure if you have any comments around that, Mark or Johan.
I'm actually not informed in that domain, so I would be very careful making any statements that can be incorrect.
No problem. Johan, anything from you?
No, not. I don't have any information on that, but we can find out and get back to you.
Absolutely.
The only thing that I know is Mauritius is the place to be to go on the retirement, but I'm not yet planning that.
Fantastic. I mean, Michael, I can add to that as well. I do know that the tourism ban with regards to South Africans going into Mauritius, there is a lift as of the 1st of September. But other than that, I'm also not informed to answer your question. But thank you very much. Michael has one more comment that he's put through to say, automation will be a partner with the people working on my sites where we are doing de-rocking in small plants, agricultural lands using excavators and trucks. So he does need automation to convert the vegetables into finished products. So there's definitely a combination there of a human element as well as the automation side of things as well. Thanks, Michael. That's great insights there. Okay, moving on to the next question. Johan, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. With regards to transformation, do you feel as a body that there has been transformation in the automation sector? I think this is a good question to lead on from the automation versus human element that we've just discussed as well.
Thank you, Chardonnay. And the quick answer there, of course, is no. But I would just like to put another peg in the ground there. If we take the people that are qualified to work in the automation industry and you put them to one side and you put those people that are not qualified to work in the industry on the other side, there's definitely on the side of the educated people, we have very good representation and transformation happen. So the big issue then is to address those that are not qualified to work in the automation industry. And that is where our focus should be. We represent the interest of the automation, instrumentation, measurement, mechatronics, and control fields. And our suppliers are of the most prominent people working in this field, especially where Mark is the SIMC Supply Advisory Council. And our whole focus is to attack that part of our population. South Africa is in a unique situation that we don't need to automate because we have got a shortage of people. Most countries have such a shortage of people, they have to automate. Now, we also have to automate to stay in competition, but we have got a huge resource field there of people that are just not skilled. It's not that they're incompetent or they cannot be skilled. They can, and that is where our focus should be in the future, to get that part of the population to start working in the industry field.
Great, thanks very much, Johan. Yes, I think the transformation is important all round. And I think just to mention at this point, we have also been looking at how we are going to work with the SAIMC at Africa Automation Technology Fair in May 2023 to have this as a key topic of discussion and use the trade fair as a vehicle to gain momentum in this regard. Mark, do you want to comment on transformation from an automation perspective?
Well, yes, I think it is important and it is all linked to education and training, like Johan was rightfully saying. If you look to the whole matter from an investors' point of view, people are very, or companies better said, are very keen to invest in South Africa and in the African continent. And like I always say, the fourth industrial revolution is the main reason that Africa is attracting so much interest, for the very simple reason that we have all the natural resources that are needed to make that fourth industrial revolution happening. And in that respect, we from the SAIMC want to also be a key driver in implementing automation in South Africa and in the rest of the African continent. And that's where one of our prime goals is to focus much on education and skills development. And we also need to define on how the future of work is going to look like, because that will be quite different to what we are used today, and in some areas we might want to leapfrog to what we are doing today to what is needed tomorrow. But one thing is for sure, and that's where the SAIMC is also pushing quite hard towards, is that we need to make sure that we have people that understand what automation is about. We want to prevent that we need to import knowledgeable people from abroad. We need to create them here. We have sufficient young people, and if you look to our COVID numbers, with all due respect for those people that battled with the disease or with the virus, it shows that, well, one of the main reasons that our numbers are low is because we have a lot of young people. The average age in South Africa is 27 years. I checked it because I was asking myself that question. If you look to the average European country, you are looking at an average age sitting between 45 and 50 years old. So from the human capital point of view, you have a lot of potential here, but we need to redefine on how do we bring these young people into the discussion. How do we skill them, upskill them, and not only on a university level, but also on a TVET college level. We need people with hands, and we need people with brains, and we need people with hands and brains, to simplify a little bit the situation. And there is too much push, to my opinion, and I'm looking as a foreigner from outside inside, there is too much push to bring people to universities, and we seem to be forgetting that whatever is engineered in a university environment still needs to be practiced in the field with people that have two hands on their body. And I think as a society, as the SAIMC, we are advocating a lot that this is where we need to be focusing on as well.
Great, thanks very much, Mark. Again, that leads really nicely into our next question, just around the education and training side, as you mentioned. Johan, I think you are also quite pro behind all of this. Do you want to just give us some insight into how important education and training is as well?
Sure, thank you, Chardonnay. We've got the situation, and it's not unique to South Africa, where the education system is not providing the products that industry would like to buy, which means that the stuff that comes, the people that come out of education, it comes into industry, and industry has to start training them all over again, and that we need to stop. In order to address that, the SAIMC has created the Supply Advisory Council, so consisting of the automation suppliers, the most prominent ones in South Africa, the End User Advisory Council, and then the Education and Training Advisory Council. Now, these three councils work together to come up with a plan on how to upskill and reskill the vast resources that Mark has been talking about. And if you look at school level, the people that come out of school, when they enter the tertiary education field, they have to be taught the basic, Word basic, Excel basic, PowerPoint Basic, and that is just not on. So the tertiary education system starts off with a product that, a raw product that it's very difficult for them to get them to an end product that that can be sold to industry. So the National Science and Technology Forum has got a separate subgroup called the Professionals in Science, Engineering and Technology, ProSET. And they have started a program called Stimulator, which is a web-based platform where people can look at what is engineering, what different aspects are there to science, engineering, and technology. It's like a mini Google on a memory stick. And that was handed and is still being handed over and being developed, given to people that don't have access to the internet. Now, interesting enough, 64% of the population of 6 million people in South Africa have, not 6 million, but 64% of the total population of South Africa has got access to the internet, which came as a surprise to me. But those that do not have access to the internet, they are being issued memory sticks. Now, the other thing which is a major drive for the SIMC is our Skills Trust Fund, where we are the first in engineering that we are creating a fund in which companies can contribute and get tax relief from their contributions, as well as get maximum BEE points for their contributions. Now, this will then enable the SIMC to provide bursaries to tertiary education, but not just to provide bursaries, but to say to tertiary education, if you change your curriculum to what industry, to deliver a product that industry wants, then we will be able to give you people bursaries to study at your education institution. We are no longer, as an industry, willing to provide bursaries for people just to study the basics. I went to one tertiary education institution and said, what are you teaching the students? And he said, well, we're teaching them PNID control. So I said, okay, let me quickly go to Google, YouTube, and I found the PNID controller there. I said, why do I have to pay you 20,000 Rand a year to study PNID control if I can get it for free on the internet? The basic idea of tertiary education providing the basics is no longer sufficient. What industry wants is for people, when they come out of tertiary education, they are specialists in the technology that they have been qualified in. When they get to industry, industry is more than willing to teach them how the process works. How does a synthol reactor work? How does a gasifier work? How does a turbine work? That industry is willing to show them. But the PLCs and the SCADA systems and the DCSs, they should be specialists in that. So the Skills Trust Fund allows them, using the model that the BBBE model that the government has supplied, to retrain people, take people from school right through to their final qualification, as well as giving them 3 years of practical experience so that they can register as professionals with the Engineering Council of South Africa. That does not only register engineers, but also technicians and technologists. So that's how important education and training is for South Africa and for the SIMC.
Thanks, Johan. That's great insights, I think, for everyone to understand the process and the importance of the education and training. You know, it's also not limited to universities, as Mark had mentioned earlier as well. It's all-round training. Again, it's something that we want to talk about at Africa Automation Technology Fair in May 2023 to help the industry understand the processes and also empower those young and upcoming people to be able to be exposed to opportunities as well. Thanks very much for that, Johan. All right, then just moving on to the next question, which aligns quite nicely with the education and training side of things. Johan, do many people in the industry understand the need for the CPD points and how to obtain those required points?
Chardonnay, no, that's a very good question, and the answer is no. And for the most part, people don't understand it. And the reason is actually the Engineering Professions Act was promulgated in the year 2000, saying only professionals are allowed to do engineering work. Now, that engineering work is not engineers, it's engineers, technicians in technology. But the problem came that when they promulgated this act, they forgot to define what engineering work is. So they couldn't implement the act. And it's now 21 years later, and still nothing happened as far as that is concerned. So now in March this year, eventually the whole process passed the Competition Commission and all the other steps that they had to bypass and all the hoops that they had to go through, and it's now been defined. So the first people that need to register starts next year in January, and it's divided into surnames. So there are 3 years that people have. I think from A to M is the first year, and then from N to, and so on. That's how the three works. So people now have got 3 years to get their registration done. And the continuous professional development is not a system that was defined by EXA. It's not an EXA system, it's a worldwide system, and it was initiated by an engineer saying doctors and accountants have to do continuously update their skills and knowledge so that they remain current. And engineering, that's the fastest moving, or one of the fastest moving technologies in the world, there was no need to do continuous education. And so that has now changed, and they have to start with this, with the registration next year. Now, the fine is quite big, and the fine is not, if you do engineering work without being registered, it's not a fine to the company that employed you, it's a fine to the individual that's doing the work. And the fine is twice the salary that a person earned while they were doing the work. So it's extremely important that people go to our website, go and look at the CPD requirements, how to register. Everything is on there. There are some examples on what you should put on that and what you shouldn't put there. Some people only have next year, those with a surname from A to M, and then that's finished. Now, EXA does not do the registration. They do the administration of the registration. The actual interviews are done by people like Mark and I, who are in the industry, we're qualified, and we do the interview to find out whether this person that's applying has got the practical experience to say that they are a professional technician or a professional technologist or a professional engineer. It's not, we must just get out of the people's minds that it's not an EXA system. This is a system by engineers for engineers.
Thanks, Johan. That's great insights. I think for everyone, it is something that most people are aware of, but with the processes changing, as you said, people have to re-register. It's great that you've given us those insights, and perhaps we can look at doing an in-depth session around that, so those who are not familiar with the process are able to become familiar and participate as well. So that there's a full understanding of the process. But thanks very much for that. So we had one comment from Mervyn just to advise that colleges of advanced technology were established in the UK 50 years ago. So yes, I guess the international standard is different, and things that have happened overseas are something that we've learned from. But it's great to get those insights. Thanks very much, Mervyn. So, Mark, I have a last question for you. Can you tell us, what role does green hydrogen play in South Africa?
Thank you, Chardonnay, for that question, which is already a very specific one. I think, let me take a step back and let us all ask the question, why are we doing automation? And how will the world be looking like tomorrow? And if you look to and I don't have the document in front of me, but remembering more or less what it says, if you look to the definition of what the World Economic Forum has brought forward as the reasons why we are now sitting in that so-called fourth industrial revolution, has everything to do with the quality of life, the planet we are living on, doing things sustainable, having more a private and professional balance, etc., etc. To give you an example, in Germany, unions are already looking at employer models, or employee models, I should say, where people will work 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. Because what they are doing and the way they are doing it is going to be quite different. And I think with COVID, you have seen clearly that decarbonization around the world has been giving a big push. You have in October the so-called COP26, which is a big global conference organized by the United Nations, and if I'm not mistaken, that takes place in London, where world leaders will sit around the table and say, okay, how do we do this different, better, and therefore more sustainable? And in that whole story, you hear a lot of countries talking about milestones, 2030, to have carbon emissions reduced to a certain percentage, 2050 to work completely decarbonized, so no longer making use of hydrocarbon processes and hydrocarbons as such. So no more gas, no more diesel, no more regular fuel, no more whatever hydrocarbon we are using out there. And at the same time, you see that from a mobility point of view, things are also going to change quite drastically. Now, the question is, are we all going to drive electrical vehicles tomorrow? And the answer might be yes, but then the next question is, are we all going to connect those electrical vehicles via an extension cord to our mains in our houses, or do we have power poles installed around the country? Surely, if you have a freestanding house, that is surely an option. If you have a freestanding house and you have a carport with some solar panels on there, that can also happen. But how do you deal with that if you live in the center of a city, 6th level or 6th floor of an apartment building? Are all these people going to put extension cords to their windows and have their electrical vehicles powered? Are planes going to be connected to the mains at the airport, wait until they load their batteries, and are then flying, and oh, the battery is running low, now we need to land? And I'm, of course, simplifying things a little bit to make my point. And that's where you see a very, very, very big shift towards sustainable energy. And in that whole discussion, green hydrogen plays an important role. Now, many of us are engineers. You surely remember also from your chemistry classes what hydrogen is about and things like that. I think it is important to also define what green hydrogen is about. Green hydrogen, and this is a separate story that could take us a lot of time, but let's limit it to the following. Green hydrogen is hydrogen produced by renewable energy. Now, globally, the International Electrical Forum has done a study and has identified the so-called hotspots in the world where there is sufficient sun and sufficient wind, so solar and wind energy available to be able to produce with that renewable energy hydrogen. And the production of hydrogen is based on an electrolysis process, as most of you know. Now, those hotspots, to name a few, well, the biggest hotspots in the world is Chile in the south of America. They have a very long coastline, and you hear me already coming. Having a long coastline is important because you have a lot of water and you have a lot of wind. The Middle East area is also one of those hotspots, including the Sahara. But it will be very difficult to build an installation and to transport out of that hot area the hydrogen that will be produced. The same counts for the Himalaya. The Himalaya also has sufficient solar and wind energy available, but try to build an installation on the height of 5,000 meters and then transport everything you produce back to the world. So to come back to Africa, there are identified 12 hotspots in the world that will be ideal locations to produce hydrogen, and then you talk producing hydrogen for a cost less than $2 sorry, per kilogram hydrogen. That's how they define that. Of those 12 countries, 8 are located in Africa. 2 of them are located in Southern Africa, and that is South Africa and Namibia. So that means, to cut a long story short, that South Africa, together also with our neighbors Namibia, they hold a very big joker in their hands called green hydrogen. And we tick 3 important, well, actually 4 important boxes. We have lots of wind. We have 2 oceans coming together, and surely in the Eastern and the Western Cape, we know what that means from a wind perspective. I come from Belgium. If I compare the number of sunny days that we have in South Africa, you have a huge capital sitting there. You have a long coastline with a lot of water that is available. And yes, we need to desalinate that water. That is absolutely clear. By the way, we need energy for that as well. Here comes my renewable again. And lastly, we have we are also a country that has a high carbon emission. And typically those countries that are having a high carbon emission are those countries that will transfer in the future quite quickly. So whatever happens now will be driven by the political will and the political transparency that our South African government is going to take. And this is critical. Luckily, we see the first signs that the president, together with his cabinet, take, for example, you are now allowed to produce up to 100 megawatt of renewable energy without a lot of paperwork that is necessary. So all those elements are going to help us to be able to globally, one of the major producers of hydrogen. That hydrogen is going to be used to drive cars, to drive trucks, to fly planes, to drive ships. Anything, any motor that is today working on hydrocarbons like gas and oil will be available tomorrow to work with hydrogen. And in that whole context, automation is obviously going to play an important role from a production point of view. Sasol already has a pilot project in the pipeline where they will produce soon sustainable aviation fuels, whether that is in Sasolburg or in Secunda or at a new factory at the coastline, I don't know, but things are happening there. So these are investments that are already going on. And if the government is foreseeing the right incentives, we can benefit even further on, because that hydrogen is put into a fuel cell, and that fuel cell produces energy, electricity. Now, what is the main material of a fuel cell? Yes, that is platinum. Who is the biggest producer in the world of platinum? Yes, that is South Africa. So we are ticking all those boxes to make it possible that we are going to attract major investments in South Africa, and with major investments, there will also be the need for major application for automation, and that's again where we as the SAIMC are promoting also in the world of sustainable energy, the green economy, renewable energy, the need for automation to be able to transport and afterwards via Richards Bay to Asia, via Saldanha Bay to Europe and America, hydrogen, that will no longer be LNG tankers, but hydrogen, cryogenic tankers that will be transporting hydrogen to those areas in the world where there is a need and where they don't have a lot of sun or wind available to produce it from their side. And that are areas like, for instance, Europe, China, America, and so on and so on. So this is a very separate story that you could spend an entire separate seminar on. But in short, I think this investment flood that is going to come, provided the South African takes the right political decisions, is going to boost also the need for automation in this country quite drastically. Green hydrogen, and that's my very personal opinion, is going to be a game changer for South Africa if we do it in the right way.
Thanks, Mark. It's a very interesting concept. We did have some conversation going on in the chat as well, just around the concept of green hydrogen and that it's essentially electrolysis. But the main question really was to see how affordable this process is for Africa.
Well, I'm not sure that I understand the question entirely, but if we are referring to the affordability of the investment, then obviously some external players need to play a role. The private sector needs to bring the necessary funding together. Now, if we talk about pilot projects, and I know a little bit about the German hydrogen strategy, Germany has allocated in their budgets 2 billion euro to subsidize around the world at those 12 hotspots I was referring to, of which 8 are located in Africa, don't forget that, to subsidize these pilot projects, because at the end of the day, Germany and Europe in general is sitting on the demand side. So a business model needs to be set up that on the one side, those countries in Africa, and I can name them all 8, that is South Africa, that is Namibia, Uganda, Kenya, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. These are the 8 countries in Africa that have been defined as the green hydrogen production hotspots. A lot of international companies will be investing in that. You see that Shell is already involved in a few pilot projects here in South Africa. Sasol is doing a few things, but new players are also coming into this world, like an Anglo-American Platts. They see that this green hydrogen is also going to drastically increase the need for platinum. So they are also assisting that market to bring funding available and all kinds of business models available so that we can produce more green hydrogen, and therefore the need for platinum on their side will increase as well. So to answer the question, is this affordable? If it is done politically in the correct way and with investments coming both from the producer as well as from the demand side, then I'm pretty sure that this can be affordable. To give you one idea, a study has been done by a German company called Enertech. They have made an estimation that if South Africa takes 10% of global hydrogen production, then 50%, 50% of South Africa GDP will be added to the, so our GDP is sitting on, if I'm remembering well, 150 billion US dollars, and I'm not sure about that number, but we can top that up with 50% GDP if we have 10% of the hydrogen production globally. So is this affordable? I think, and I see the last remark there, the Middle East is already building green hydrogen plants. That is very true. Why you think that suddenly Saudi Aramco is so interested to be investing in a CPS plant, concentrated CSP plant, concentrated solar plant in the Northern Cape, because of they also know that in 10, 20, 30 years, their oil and gas in the Middle East will no longer be used. It will be hydrogen. Africa and South Africa in particular has the potential to become one of the new, let's call it Saudi Arabias from an energy perspective.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's great insights there, and I hope the question that was asked was answered. I am conscious of time, and I know we are running out of time. So if there are any further questions that the attendees may have, please feel free to push those through to us on our customer service inbox, and we will be able to answer those for you after the session. If you know of anybody that wanted to attend that couldn't make it, you can advise that the recording will be made available within the next week on the AATF YouTube channel as well. So that does bring us to a close. Thank you, Mark and Johan, for your great insights. I think you really have given us some valuable food for thought and insights as well. And thank you to all the attendees for attending our very first webinar for the 2021 series. Our next webinar in the essence of Women Month will be celebrating and looking at our African women in technology, and that will be taking place on the 12th of August at 11 a.m. So you can register for that event. After this live event, registration will be open, and please follow the link that will be on your screen. Please also take the time to complete the short questionnaire for us. Your feedback is exceptionally important to us. And yes, we look forward to having you all part of the series moving forward. As we said, it is Technology Tuesdays and Thursdays. Regular updates happening on the website as well as on our social media channels. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, everyone. Keep safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.